Norfolk, Virginia. Dawn, June 4th, 1943. A heavy mist hangs over the pier. A line of German prisoners descends the gangplank after 14 days across the Atlantic. The camera lingers on the face of Corporal Herman Burcher. Behind him, steel cranes turning, white and black workers side by side, a Navy band playing for a war bond rally just a few docks away. No one screams. No one points guns. No one is afraid of the enemy's uniform. Cut. Fort Devens, Massachusetts, September 1944. The train carrying 47 German women screeches to a stop. Greta Mueller looks through the iron bars. Green hills, clean streets, and American soldiers walking toward them, holding cups of water. 3 meals a day, medical checkups, permission to write letters. The nurse officer reads slowly, in perfect German. 2 lives, 2 different roads. Yet both will meet the same truth. A nation at war, running as if peace had never left. Inside the camp, they will find Geneva rules pinned to the wall, penicillin in the infirmary, and shelves of soap, paper, and chocolate. What could break their old beliefs wasn't a weapon, but what they were about to witness. Ordinary humanity. June 4th, 1943. The gray water of the Atlantic slaps against the hull of a transport ship entering Norfolk Naval Base. Corporal Herman Burcher, 26, steps onto American soil for the first time. His legs shake after 2 weeks at sea. The air smells of diesel, coffee, and salt. He looks up and freezes. Across the docks, men and women move like a well-oiled machine. Cranes lift cargo in perfect rhythm. A black worker laughs beside a white foreman. Children sell newspapers near the gates. A woman in overalls signals a truck driver with a cigarette between her lips. It is not chaos. It is confidence. Burcher whispers to the man behind him in disbelief. Die spinnen, die Amerikaner. They're mad, these Americans. He expected fear, hatred, distance. Instead, he sees indifference. A nation so sure of itself, it no longer needs to prove anything. The processing yard of Norfolk Naval Base smells of disinfectant and oil. American officers read the Geneva Convention out loud, in German. They explain rights. They ask about diets. They offer kosher meals to Jewish prisoners. At first, the Germans laugh, nervously. They think it's mockery. It isn't. Jewish American sergeants hand out Red Cross parcels with steady hands. Tell us if you need special food, one says. A silence follows, heavy, confused. Burcher writes later in his memoir, in Germany, we were told prisoners were tools to exploit or mouths to silence. Here, they were guests with rules. The next morning, prisoners are loaded onto passenger coaches, not boxcars, cushioned seats, windows open to the world. As the train passes Washington, D.C., they see soldiers kissing wives goodbye on the same platform. Children wave flags. Teenagers drink milkshakes in the station cafe. Through the glass, the Germans watch a country unafraid of them. Factories along the route are uncamouflaged. Signs shout company names. Glen L. Martin Aircraft, Bethlehem Steel. Burcher counts dozens of new bombers lined up in plain sight. No secret police, no paranoia. Just production. Confident, loud, visible. They do not hide what they build, he notes. They have no reason to. Camp Hearne, Texas. It's evening when the prisoners enter the mess hall. To their shock, American sailors are already eating there. 2 groups, enemies who once tried to kill each other, share the same space, the same food, the same smell of coffee. The Americans don't even look at them. They laugh at a baseball broadcast on the radio. Freedom, Burcher realizes, sounds like laughter that doesn't need permission. Camp Hearne covers 720 acres. Wooden barracks, hot water, electric light, beds with sheets. The hospital is spotless. X-ray machines, surgery rooms, and bottles labeled penicillin. A Swiss Red Cross inspector notes, medical treatment equals or exceeds that given to American soldiers. For men who came from deserts and trenches, it feels unreal. Inside the infirmary, a black medic draws blood from a German officer. The officer stiffens, waiting for insult or humiliation. But the medic just says, "You'll be fine, sir," and walks away. Burcher writes, it was a small act, but it cracked something inside me. The camp store is the strangest sight of all. Enemy soldiers buying cigarettes, chocolate, notebooks, even harmonicas. with script earned from labor. They stand in line, joking, comparing prices, while guards look on casually. A sign above the counter reads, "Earn, spend, live." For the first time, prisoners feel the illusion of choice, and it confuses them more than chains ever did. By September 1943, America faces a labor shortage. German prisoners are sent to work in farms and factories across Texas. They earn 80 cents a day in camp currency, the same as an American private. At King Ranch, they see agriculture beyond imagination. Fields stretch farther than the horizon. Machines harvest what once took hundreds of men. Trucks rumble across the plains. Planes buzz overhead to herd cattle. "We work beside Mexicans and Negroes," Burcher recalls. "They laugh together." In Germany, that would have been a crime. Every day on the ranch becomes a lesson in contradiction. Productivity through respect, not fear. Freedom here has layers. German prisoners can walk the same streets where black soldiers can't sit at the front of a theater. They eat in restaurants that refuse their own guard service. To men raised on racial hierarchy, it's incomprehensible. How could a nation so divided still function? They ask. Yet it does, and thrives. America's contradiction doesn't hide its flaw, it wears it openly, and that honesty becomes its strength. In town, prisoners see girls driving trucks, supervising men, even flying training planes at Bryan Airfield. They see American teenagers dancing to swing music. Degenerate Negro music, Nazi propaganda called it. Yet the whole town seems alive because of it. On Christmas Eve, 1943, the people of Hearne bring gifts to the camp. 4,000 packages, candy, cigarettes, books, instruments. The church choir sings Stille Nacht in German. Some of the prisoners weep. These people whose sons fought against us brought us gifts, Burcher writes. Their kindness was not weakness, but the confidence of victors. By 1944, the camp library holds 5,000 books. German authors once banned by Hitler, Mann, Remarque, Feuchtwanger, line the shelves. Sam Houston College sends professors to teach English, history, and science. Prisoners study democracy while still wearing uniforms of a fallen Reich. The camp newspaper evolves. Early issues echo Nazi slogans. Later ones debate freedom of speech. Even dissent is allowed, and that too becomes education. Major Maxwell McKnight's report states, within 6 months, 60% of neutral prisoners show measurable movement toward democratic ideals. September 1944, Massachusetts, a different train, a different kind of prisoner. 47 German women, nurses, auxiliaries, secretaries. Greta Mueller watches the world outside the window. Clean towns, laughing children, music on the radio. Her first shock isn't cruelty, it's compassion. At the camp hospital, Captain Margaret Walsh, an Irish-American nurse, treats her with professionalism, not pity. Greta is assigned to assist, to care for enemy patients. Within days, she's holding a feverish American child, singing an old German lullaby. The room falls silent. Captain Walsh whispers, "You see, healing doesn't wear a uniform." For both Burcher and Greta, the war begins to unravel, not in the field, but in their minds. Every kindness feels like betrayal. Every freedom feels like punishment. The Geneva Convention, the open factories, the mixed-race crews, the laughter, the gifts, none of it matches the image of the decadent enemy they were taught to despise. They defeated us, Burcher writes, not with guns, but with decency. As winter approaches, a new kind of battle begins. Not of bullets, but of conscience. Faith begins to fracture. Old loyalties decay. And inside the calm of American camps, thousands of prisoners start fighting the only war they can't escape. The war within themselves. The rhythm of life in America never slows. Factories roar, trains thunder, children play, as if war belongs to another planet. For the German prisoners, every sound becomes proof of something they were never meant to see. A democracy that works, not by fear, but by cooperation. At the Alcoa aluminum plant in Texas, Burcher watches men throw away metal scraps worth more than a week's rations in Germany. He can't comprehend the waste, or the confidence it represents. An American foreman laughs, "We don't waste it, friend. We recycle it into victory." To Burcher, it's not arrogance, it's belief. Trains move prisoners through industrial valleys glowing orange from blast furnaces. The night sky itself burns with production. From Harrisburg to Baltimore, they see cars, lights, and gardens in every worker's home. One German officer writes home, a letter intercepted by censors. "Even the poor here live better than our officers." The thought spreads like infection. If the enemy's workers are this free, what does that say about the Reich's promises? The camp becomes a mirror of the country outside. Orderly, busy, endlessly active. Sports fields, libraries, workshops. Prisoners organize classes in carpentry, languages, and agriculture. But beneath the calm lies tension. Every act of freedom divides them. Some see hope. Others see betrayal. A propaganda group forms secretly, painting swastikas in the latrine, whispering about traitors. They call themselves the true Germans. Their weapon is not violence but fear of shame. At Fort Devens, Greta's world expands quietly. She assists Captain Walsh in the hospital each morning, cleaning wounds, feeding children, writing reports. At night, she learns English with a small group of prisoners. She writes to her sister, "The Americans are strange. They smile even when they lose. They work without shouting, and they believe that mercy is strength." The letter never reaches Germany, but her words will one day be read aloud in a classroom, decades later, by one of her own students. In Massachusetts, Dorothy Hayes, the mother of a fallen American soldier, brings bread deliveries to the camp. One day, through a hospital window, she sees Greta tending to a wounded woman. There's something in the Germans' movements. Gentle, deliberate, human. Dorothy can't look away. She remembers her son Jimmy's letters from Europe. "Even the enemy bleeds the same, Mom." Weeks later, Dorothy returns with a worn German-English dictionary. She hands it to Greta, her voice steady but fragile. "My son bought this before he went to war. He wanted to understand the world." Greta opens the cover, the name James Hayes faintly written in pencil. For a long moment, neither woman speaks. "I'm sorry," Greta whispers. "So am I," Dorothy answers. "It's not forgiveness, not yet, but something close to it." Back in Texas, the U.S. Army launches the Special Projects Division. Its goal, re-educate prisoners through exposure, not indoctrination. No loudspeakers, no propaganda films, just reality. Prisoners read American newspapers that criticize their own government. They hear comedians mocking generals on the radio. They see elections where leaders argue publicly and survive. Major McKnight calls it democracy by demonstration. The result stuns even the planners. Within months, the camps produce letters and essays praising free speech. Burcher writes, "In Germany, disagreement meant prison. Here it means progress." December 1943, Christmas Eve. In Hearne, church choirs rehearse Silent Night. Local families donate food, gifts, decorations for the enemy. A 30-foot Christmas tree glows in the center of the camp. Children from town come to sing for the prisoners. Burcher stands near the back, holding a cup of cocoa. He watches an American mother place a small gift in each prisoner's hand. Her son is fighting in Italy. Tears fill his eyes. "These people whose sons we tried to kill brought us joy," he writes. "Their kindness wasn't weakness, it was victory." That night, many prisoners lie awake, staring at the ceiling. Something inside them begins to break. Not from cruelty, but from grace. Across hundreds of camps, the same pattern unfolds. Men raised on fear encounter freedom and can't unsee it. They start debating in English, reading banned books, arguing about government systems. Even hardline Nazis grow silent. A Swiss inspector writes in his 1944 report, "The most dangerous weapon in these camps is fairness." In March 1944, a fire breaks out in a barrack at Hearne. The investigation finds no enemy action, only a stove accident. But rumors spread that anti-Nazi prisoners were targeted. Tension peaks. Colonel Stiles gathers the camp. He speaks slowly in German. "No man here is judged by what flag he served, only by what kind of man he chooses to be now." Silence follows, deeper than any order. That night, graffiti disappears from the walls. The next morning, prisoners rebuild the burned barrack themselves. It's the moment the war inside the camp turns. At Fort Devens, Dorothy visits again. She and Greta sit across a wooden table in a small visiting room. The air smells of disinfectant and paper. "He died in Normandy," Dorothy says, voice barely above a whisper. "My brother died in Russia," Greta replies. For the next 2 hours, they talk, haltingly, painfully, about sons, brothers, fear, and the small mercies of memory. When Dorothy leaves, she presses the dictionary into Greta's hands. "Keep it," she says. "Use it to write home. Jimmy would have liked that." Greta can't answer. She only nods, clutching the book like a fragile piece of peace. By early 1945, word reaches the camps. Germany is collapsing. Prisoners stare at maps in disbelief. Berlin under siege. Hitler silent. The Reich dying. Some cheer, most don't. If the Führer is gone, one asks, what are we? No one replies. Even the diehards stop saluting. The flags are folded away quietly. April 1945. Inside the Hearne Recreation Hall, Burcher stands before a chalkboard. On it, he's written a single question. Why did we lose? The men answer hesitantly. Too few resources. Bad strategy. Too many fronts. He shakes his head. No, we lost because we stopped believing in humanity. The room falls silent. Someone in the back begins to clap. Then another. Soon the hall echoes with applause that sounds more like confession than celebration. The war in Europe ends weeks later. But in these camps, in Hearne, in Devens, in hundreds of small towns, something larger is reborn. The enemy saw America and did not find monsters. They found mirrors. For the first time, they understood. Freedom is not the absence of control. It is the presence of choice. Texas, autumn 1944. Rain drips from tin roofs. The nights are long, the air thick with humidity and silence. Inside Camp Hearne, a different kind of war begins. A war without bullets, fought only in the mind. Herman Burcher writes in his notebook, "We eat well, we sleep safely, and yet I feel sick. This comfort burns worse than hunger, because every bite reminds me how far we've fallen." Comfort, it turns out, is the cruelest interrogation. The barracks become battlegrounds of ideology. 10% are openly anti-Nazi, 15% still cling to Hitler's ghost. The rest, the silent majority, simply want the war to end. At night, the true Germans gather in whispers. They call collaborators Schwein. They post warnings on bunks, threats on mirrors. One morning, a man named Karl Aumer is found hanging in the washroom. A note reads, "I will not eat with traitors." Colonel Stiles orders no revenge, no punishment. He says quietly to his men, "Let them see that mercy cannot be burned." The message spreads faster than the fear. Massachusetts. Greta Mueller feels the same war, though her bars are invisible. After the town protests the cultural exchange, her friendships with Americans become poison inside the camp. A note slips under her pillow. Those who speak English are no longer German. Greta hides the note, but from that night on, she stops using English. She moves through the hospital like a ghost. Efficient, polite, mute. Captain Walsh watches her fade. She's trapped, the nurse writes later. Not by wire, but by loyalty she no longer believes in. The guilt spreads like smoke. Every hot meal feels undeserved. Every laugh feels like betrayal. Burcher notes, "I think of my comrades starving in Europe. And here I am, eating American bread. I cannot decide if I am lucky or damned." Some prisoners cut their hands or fake illness, hoping to move to the infirmary, away from judgmental eyes. They are not escaping punishment, they are escaping shame. In 1944, the U.S. War Department expands special projects. They call it reorientation, not re-education. The plan is simple: destroy Nazism by showing an alternative that works. No sermons, no threats, just life. Prisoners are sent to work under female supervisors. They attend open debates. They watch films about democracy, race, and tolerance without commentary. At first, they laugh, then they stop laughing. Reality speaks louder than propaganda. Within months, camp psychologists record measurable ideological shifts. The data is dry, the change is not. January 1945. Barracks 3 catches fire after midnight. Flames lick the sky. Prisoners run in chaos, hauling water buckets, shouting names. When the smoke clears, 3 are dead. One of them, an American instructor of German language, Joseph Adler, a man of Jewish descent. The camp stands in silence at dawn. Colonel Stiles addresses them. They wanted to burn hatred into this ground. Instead, they burned proof that hate destroys its own. No reprisals follow. The ashes are left as warning and lesson. Fort Devens, February 1945. Snow presses against the windows. Greta collapses during morning rounds. Her hands shake. She hasn't eaten in days. Captain Walsh carries her to a cot. "Greta," she whispers, "you can't heal others if you refuse to forgive yourself." Tears fall silently down Greta's face. "My mother is starving," she murmurs, "and I am alive." For the first time, Captain Walsh breaks regulation. She sits beside Greta, holds her hand. No rank, no enemy lines. Just 2 women caught in the same storm. At Hearne, a new experiment begins. A camp council of 7 prisoners is elected to handle disputes. For the first time, Germans govern themselves, under rules, not orders. A fight erupts one night between 2 men, an SS loyalist and a farm laborer. The council debates. They vote. Verdict: 3 days of compulsory labor. The Americans don't intervene. They just observe. The council's decision stands. It is a small victory. Democracy practiced behind barbed wire. Burcher's transformation deepens. In an English language class taught by Professor Samuel Pierce from Princeton, the topic is, "Why did Hitler fail?" Burcher hesitates, then answers, "Because he believed men obey from fear." "But fear builds nothing." Pierce nods slowly. "Then you understand America better than most Americans." It's the first time Burcher speaks English to an audience. Applause breaks out. Quiet, respectful, real. Massachusetts, March 1945. Dorothy Hayes walks through the camp gate with a permit in her trembling hands. She asks to see Greta. They meet in the hospital kitchen. Light from a single bulb glows between them. Dorothy says softly, "They can call me unpatriotic if they want, but I'd rather be hated for compassion than loved for revenge." Greta's voice cracks. "Your kindness feels heavier than any punishment." They share a quiet smile. 2 women carrying grief on opposite sides of the same war. Spring 1945. Rumors of Germany's defeat spread through the camps. Some prisoners pray. Others stare at the ground for hours. A guard overhears one officer whisper, "If the Führer is gone, who am I?" Identity dies slower than empires. Many cry for the first time, not for the Reich, but for themselves. Burcher writes, "The war is ending, but our punishment is just beginning, to live with what we believed." Inside the camp chapel, a priest holds mass. Half the benches are empty. The remaining men kneel, not out of faith, but exhaustion. The priest says, "You are not praying for victory anymore. You are praying for forgiveness." Burcher lowers his head, whispering, "Forgive us for mistaking obedience for virtue." In April, Greta receives the last letter from home. Her mother is dead. Hamburg is ruins. Her sister missing. She sits alone in the empty classroom, opens Jimmy Hayes' dictionary. Her finger stops at one word, peace. Captain Walsh enters quietly. "She'd be proud of you," she says. "No," Greta answers. "She'd be shocked that I learned it here." May 1945, victory in Europe. At Camp Hearne, the news arrives by radio. Fireworks explode in the nearby town. Prisoners stand in silence. No cheers and no anger, just relief and the crushing emptiness of purpose lost. One soldier drops his cap and weeps. No one laughs at him. Even the guards bow their heads. "Hell," Burcher writes, "isn't fire or chains. It's the moment you realize the monster you fought lived inside you all along." The camp is quiet. Men lie awake, staring at ceilings that no longer belong to their captors. Outside, a black guard hums a tune. A German voice joins softly from a window. 2 voices, 1 melody. In that fragile harmony, the war truly ends. Major McKnight's final report reads, 60% of neutral prisoners display democratic behavior after 6 months of exposure. Transformation achieved not by force, but by example. He concludes, The mind, once shown another way to live, cannot return to ignorance. Burcher closes his notebook. The next morning, he will begin his journey home, not as a soldier, but as a man who finally understands freedom. The war in Europe has ended, but in Texas it lingers, not in sound, but in silence. Camp Hearne stands under a pale orange sun, its fences still intact, its watchtowers now manned by soldiers who no longer watch for escape. Herman Burcher packs his few belongings, a notebook, a photo, and a harmonica he bought with camp script. For 2 years, the barbed wire had become the border between who he was and who he would become. On the gate, a sign reads, "You have seen. Now remember." He reads it twice, unsure if it's meant for him or for America itself. December 2nd, 1945. A cold wind sweeps across the parade ground. Prisoners line up in silence, each holding a small duffel bag marked POW. Colonel Cecil Stiles, the man who commanded without cruelty, walks the line slowly. He shakes each man's hand, the same hands that once pointed rifles at his own countrymen. "You came here as soldiers," he says. "Leave as men." Burcher salutes him, not out of duty, but respect. As the trucks start their engines, he looks back one last time. Through the dust, he sees Isaiah, the black American worker who once shared his lunch. Burcher raises his hand in farewell. Isaiah nods and says simply, "Take care, brother." Years later, that single word, brother, would stay in Burcher's memory longer than the sound of any gunfire. Fort Devens, Massachusetts, November 1945. The camp smells of disinfectant and pine. Greta Mueller stands in front of the hospital window where she once cared for American patients. She's leaving tomorrow, back to Germany, back to rubble. Captain Margaret Walsh hands her an envelope. "A letter of recommendation," she says softly. "You were a good nurse and a better person." Greta smiles faintly. "I learned here that kindness can survive even war." Walsh reaches into her coat pocket and gives her a folded photograph. The two of them, standing in the infirmary. It's the only picture Greta will take home. From Texas to New York, from Massachusetts to the ports. Thousands of German prisoners begin the long return. Burcher sits by the train window, watching America rush by in a blur of cornfields, factories, and glowing neon signs. Every small-town diner, every billboard feels like proof that democracy survived the fire. A sign flashes past, "Buy bonds, build the future." He whispers, "They already have." On the ship back to Europe, he opens his notebook and writes a final entry. "I left Germany as a believer in strength. I leave America as a believer in dignity." Hamburg, spring 1946. Smoke still rises from the rubble. The city smells of ash, mold, and hunger. Burcher walks through what's left of his neighborhood. Children play among the ruins with sticks for rifles. A mother boils weeds for soup. He finds the foundation of his old home, just bricks and a half-standing wall. In the dirt, he buries his American cigarette case and whispers, "May this ground one day deserve freedom." Weeks later, Greta arrives in Hamburg. She steps off the truck and stands among blackened chimneys and broken churches. Her mother is dead, her sister missing. The city she once dreamed of returning to now feels smaller than a camp cell. She holds the English dictionary that Dorothy Hayes gave her. It opens on the word hope. A British soldier passing by asks, "Are you lost?" She answers softly, "No, just learning where to begin again." Over the next few years, former prisoners from America scatter across the ruins of the Reich. They rebuild schools, town halls, and farms. Not with orders, but with ideas. They teach crop rotation learned in Texas, community councils modeled after camp elections, and the principle that disagreement doesn't mean disloyalty. U.S. occupation records note, returned POWs display advanced understanding of democratic process. In the Bundestag of the 1950s, 48 members are former American prisoners. Hundreds become teachers, mayors, engineers. Thousands raise families that will one day call the United States an ally. Their education came not from lectures, but from witness. 40 years later, the Hearne Democrat prints a headline, "German veterans return to Texas. 50 men, gray-haired and slow, stand where the barracks once were. The camp is gone. Only the wind and a memorial stone remain." Herman Burcher, now in his 60s, places flowers on the spot where the fire took 3 lives in 1945. Beside him stands Isaiah's son, a U.S. Army veteran. They shake hands. A reporter asks Burcher, "What did you learn here?" He answers without hesitation, that the strongest country isn't the one that conquers enemies. It's the one that dares to forgive them. That same summer, Greta, now an English teacher in Hamburg, writes a letter. The handwriting is careful, old-fashioned. The envelope is addressed to Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, Massachusetts, USA. "Dear Dorothy, I still keep your son's dictionary. It sits on my classroom desk. My students' first English word each year is forgive. I tell them it came from an American boy who believed the world could be better. You were right. Mercy is stronger than memory." The letter arrives on June 6, 1984, the 40th anniversary of D-Day. After the war, the U.S. government releases the statistics: 425,000 German POWs held in America. Only 54 escaped for more than a month. 7 sabotage incidents, 0 uprisings. The conclusion: discipline achieved not through force, but through fairness. Surveys conducted after repatriation show 74% of returned prisoners hold favorable views of American democracy. 61% support post-war cooperation. Thousands apply for U.S. immigration. Burcher is among them. In 1953, he becomes a citizen, not of a perfect country, but of one that taught him perfection isn't necessary for justice. In a 1985 interview, retired Captain Margaret Walsh reflects, "Greta taught me that compassion is not surrender. It's what separates us from the madness we fought." Dorothy Hayes passes away 3 years later. In her final journal entry, she writes, "My son died believing people could change. Greta proved him right." Scholars call the German POW program the most successful re-education in modern history. Arnold Kramer, in Nazi Prisoners in America, writes, "The United States defeated Nazism not only on the battlefield, but in the hearts of those who once served it." Historian Antonio Thompson adds, 425,000 men entered as enemies. Most left as witnesses of a better world. When Herman Burcher dies in 1988, his family finds a single page taped to his diary. It reads, "Do not build statues for us. Leave the lights on in the camps. Light, not power, is what saved us." That message is engraved today on a memorial stone at Hearne, Texas. Every year, students visit, not to honor war, but to study peace born from it. The German prisoners came expecting monsters. What they found was humanity. Ordinary, flawed, relentless. They discovered that democracy, though messy, never needs to prove its strength through cruelty. In a century of darkness, America's quiet victory was not in destruction, but in the radical act of decency. The camera pans over faded photographs, men shaking hands, women singing in church halls, children waving at soldiers who no longer had enemies to fight. The greatest triumph of the Second World War wasn't a battlefield won, but a heart changed.